Imagine for a moment that the history you were taught in school, the clean timeline of human progress we all take for granted, is missing a massive, jagged piece of the puzzle. Somewhere in the deep, silent layers of the Earth lies an anomaly that shouldn't exist, a discovery so fundamentally disruptive that it threatens to pull the thread on everything we thought we knew about the dawn of civilization. This isn't a conspiracy theory or a myth. It is a cold, hard reality of archaeology that has been quietly tucked away in academic journals because the alternative, admitting we were wrong about the very beginning of our story, is too destabilizing for the mainstream to handle. We're taught that the story of humanity is a slow, steady climb from primitive hunter-gatherers to settled farmers, eventually leading to the grand stone cities of Egypt and Mesopotamia. But think about this for a second. What if the peak of human capability didn't start where we think it did? In the mid-1990s, on a dusty, unremarkable limestone ridge in southeastern Turkey, a discovery was made that effectively reset the clock on human history by 6,000 years. It is a place called Göbekli Tepe, and while its name is becoming known in specialized circles, the sheer, unsettling weight of what it represents has yet to truly sink into our collective consciousness. When researchers first began to scrape away the dry earth, they expected to find a modest medieval outpost or perhaps a minor Byzantine cemetery. Instead, they struck the top of a massive T-shaped limestone pillar, intricately carved with the figures of scorpions, lions, and vultures. As they dug deeper, they realized they weren't looking at a single stone, but an entire complex of massive, circular enclosures. The scale was staggering, but the date was what truly paralyzed the scientific community. These structures were built nearly 12,000 years ago. To put that in perspective, this site was already thousands of years old by the time the first stone was laid for the Great Pyramid of Giza. It was built at a time when humans were supposed to be wandering in small, nomadic bands, struggling to survive the end of the last ice age. Here is where it becomes unsettling for anyone who values a logical timeline. According to every textbook ever written, you cannot have massive monumental architecture without agriculture. You need a surplus of food to feed the hundreds of specialized laborers required to quarry, carve, and transport stones that weigh up to 20 tons. You need a complex social hierarchy, a government, and a permanent settlement. But the people who built this place had none of those things. There are no signs of domesticated grain, no permanent houses, and no pottery. These were hunter-gatherers, people we previously dismissed as primitive, yet they were moving monoliths with a precision that defies our understanding of their tools. Imagine the environment of that site for a moment. Imagine the heat of the Anatolian sun beating down on a landscape that 12,000 years ago was a lush forest of oak forests and roaming herds of gazelle. The air would have been thick with the smell of wood smoke and the rhythmic metallic clinking of flint against limestone. Thousands of people gathered from hundreds of miles away, working in a coordinated frenzy to raise pillars that reached toward the stars. They weren't building a city to live in, they were building a temple to something we can no longer name. The silence of the site today masks a period of human intensity that shouldn't have been possible for another 6 millennia. But think about the technicality of the feat. To move a 20-ton stone without wheels, without beasts of burden, and without metal tools requires a level of engineering and social organization that we simply didn't think existed in 10,000 BC. They had to understand leverage, friction, and structural integrity. And they didn't just do it once. They built an enclosure, used it for a few centuries, and then did something even more bizarre. They buried it. They didn't let the wind and rain reclaim it. They painstakingly filled the entire complex with thousands of tons of clean dirt, effectively turning the site into an artificial hill. They preserved their mystery on purpose, almost as if they were leaving a time capsule for a future version of humanity that they knew would eventually come looking. And this is the part most people miss when they hear about ancient ruins. We focus on the what, but the why is far more haunting. Why did nomadic people suddenly feel the need to congregate in the thousands to create something so permanent? Many researchers now believe that it wasn't agriculture that led to organized religion and monumental building, but the other way around. The desire to gather at a sacred place like this created the need for a massive, reliable food source, which forced us to learn how to farm. It means that the very spark of our modern world, the reason you live in a house and buy food from a store, started with a mysterious obsession with these stones. We didn't become civilized and then build temples. We built temples and were forced to become civilized to keep them going. Here is where it takes a turn that almost no one talks about. As the excavations continued, it became clear that Göbekli Tepe wasn't an isolated fluke. Satellite imagery and ground-penetrating radar have begun to reveal dozens of similar hills across the region, still buried, still waiting. We're looking at a landscape of lost civilization that predates every known empire. Yet when you look at the news or the curriculum of most universities, this discovery is treated as a footnote. Why? Perhaps it's because if we truly acknowledge it, we have to admit that our understanding of human potential is flawed. It suggests that humans are capable of massive, coordinated, high-level engineering far earlier than we want to believe. It opens the door to the possibility that we have forgotten more about our past than we currently remember. Think about the implications of a forgotten era of greatness. If hunter-gatherers could do this, what else were they capable of? We see the carvings of animals on the pillars, creatures that are stylized, artistic, and deeply symbolic. They weren't just scratching lines into rock, they were communicating a complex mythology. They had a language of symbols that we are only now beginning to crack. When you stand in the shadow of one of these pillars, you feel a strange, cold connection to a mind that lived 12,000 years ago, a mind that was just as sharp, just as ambitious, and just as terrified of the unknown. The mystery deepens when you realize that the skill level at the site actually declined over time. The oldest circles are the largest and most sophisticated. As the centuries passed, the builders seemed to lose their touch, or perhaps their motivation. The stones got smaller, the carvings became cruder, and eventually the entire culture simply vanished into the shadows of history, leaving behind nothing but the hills they intentionally created. It's a reverse of the traditional narrative of progress. Instead of starting small and getting better, they started with a masterpiece and slowly faded away. This discovery changed history because it proved that the human spirit doesn't wait for technology to achieve the impossible. We have always been ambitious. We have always been engineers. But it remains outside the mainstream conversation because it is a problematic find. It doesn't fit into neat boxes of the Bronze Age or the Stone Age. It sits in a dark, uncomfortable middle ground that suggests our ancestors were far more sophisticated than we give them credit for. It challenges the ego of the modern world, reminding us that we are not the first ones to master the earth. As you look at the world today, with our steel skyscrapers and digital networks, it's easy to feel like we are the pinnacle of the human story. But think about this for a second. 12,000 years from now, will anything of our world remain? Or will we be another lost civilization, buried under an artificial hill, waiting for a future explorer to scrape away the dirt and wonder how we ever managed to build something so grand? The stones of the Turkish hills are a warning as much as a discovery. They tell us that history is not a straight line, but a series of peaks and valleys, and that sometimes the most important chapters are the ones we've spent thousands of years trying to forget. The deep expansion of this mystery is only just beginning. With each new pillar uncovered, the timeline of humanity stretches out a little further, and the silence of the past grows a little louder. We are standing at the edge of a new understanding of ourselves, staring into a mirror that is 12,000 years old.
The question is no longer whether we are ready to find the truth, but whether we are ready to accept that the truth might be far more complex and far more ancient than we ever dared to imagine.